During my hospital stay, make sure you take care of me and my mom's nursing needs. Just because I'm not around, don't slack off on the housework. I'm keeping an eye on you, you know. As a wife, that's only natural for you. I'm letting you live here with meals provided 3 times a day, so it's the least you can do. After being involved in an accident away from home, my husband, who was forced into a long-term hospitalization, ordered me to take care of him during his stay. Being transported to a hospital far from home, attending to him daily meant neglecting the care of my mother-in-law. No way, absolutely not. Having silently obeyed my husband and mother-in-law until now, finding out about my husband's secret made me realize it was utterly wrong for me to be the only one enduring and suffering. I decided to fight back. As a result, it caused a huge uproar with my husband's misdeeds coming to light one after another. I work as an insurance agent, and that's how I met and married my current husband. When he proposed, he was living with his parents, but he said we would start a new life just the 2 of us after getting married. We both agreed that living with parents was pointless as we were adults. While I agreed, I couldn't help but worry whether his parents were against it. Upon visiting his family home to announce our marriage, I found out for the first time that his mother was disabled and in need of care. Why didn't you tell me before? Did you think I would refuse to marry you if I knew about the need for a caregiver? I asked him, but he didn't give me a clear answer. I told him I didn't want to end up regretting our marriage because things weren't as I expected. He mentioned that the idea of living together with his mother came up, but he was reluctant about it. I, for one, wanted to enjoy the newlywed life, just the 2 of us, for at least the first year. But I can't neglect my mom either. It seems like it's up to you, my future wife, to decide. He left the decision up to me, whether we would live with his parents or not. During my time as an insurance agent, I've seen many people choosing not to marry because of some issue with their parents. I used to tell them it depended on how their partner felt. Now, I find myself in that very situation. Because someone raised and nurtured my husband, I have my current happiness. With that thought, I couldn't simply say, do whatever you want about my mother-in-law. She's the one who gave birth to you and raised you. I think we can make it work if we cooperate together. So, you're saying you're okay with us living together? I nodded. In a way, I could say that I was the one who made the decision to live together. I had no idea this decision would drastically change my life at that time. Upon getting married, I quit my job and started living with my husband and mother-in-law, just the 3 of us. At first, my mother-in-law often expressed her gratitude for the care, but gradually, she took it for granted and stopped saying thank you altogether. Instead, all I got were complaints about me. Though her body was frail, her mind was sharp, and she had a way with words. She started saying I was unapproachable and lacked charm every time she saw me, like it was her catchphrase. So unapproachable and still managed to be an insurance agent. I bet you didn't have even 1 client, did you? Were you just scamming my son? While it's true I met my husband through my job, he had already been a client before I took over his account. I never thought of scamming him through insurance sales. I'm not gonna kick the bucket that easily, so don't think you can get rid of me and cash in on the insurance money. Honestly, taking care of my mother-in-law, there were times I wondered why I had to go through all this. But I never wished for her to just die already. I don't even know how much insurance she has. I've never heard anything about it from my husband. When things got really tough, I talked to my husband about it. But all he said was, "Mom's just frustrated because she can't move as she used to. If you paid more attention to her, maybe she'd be in a better mood." It's always me, huh? But you promised you'd help take care of your mom too. That was if you kept working. You're a stay-at-home wife now, so you've got plenty of time, right? I'm swamped with work during the day. In the end, I was left to do all the household chores and take care of my mother-in-law by myself. Despite her physical limitations, my mother-in-law was active and wouldn't stay in one place. Our house was wheelchair accessible, so she could move around freely. But there were times when she absolutely needed assistance, so I couldn't be away from home for long. I had to rush through necessary shopping, without the luxury to browse and think things over. Meals became monotonous, and recently, my husband started to complain about it too. Amidst this, a friend invited me out for a meal. She said that it wasn't good for my physical or mental health to only be focused on housework and caregiving, and suggested we go out for a meal once in a while. When I mentioned this to my mother-in-law, she got furious, accusing me of abandoning an old, disabled person to enjoy a nice meal by myself. My husband also got angry, questioning how I could consider dining out when I wasn't earning any money, and that day, both my mother-in-law and husband made sure to watch me closely so I couldn't go out. From that day on, my mother-in-law started to take notes of my every move. She demanded I return from shopping within 30 minutes, limit bathroom breaks to 3 minutes, and showers to 15 minutes. Any deviation would result in my bathing time being cut short, further reducing my brief moments of respite from caregiving. With no end in sight and feeling utterly alone and unsupported, negative emotions began to dominate me. As I grew more withdrawn, my husband's business trips became more frequent, reducing the time he spent at home. Although my husband's absence meant less care needed on his part, it also meant my mother-in-law treated me more like a servant. On the rare occasions my husband was home, his attitude became more arrogant, and he started to berate me. Before we were married, I thought of my husband as my strongest ally, but living together, it seemed he only saw me as a mere roommate. Lately, it feels like he regards me as an enemy invading his territory, a pest. Did I do something to deserve such harsh treatment from my husband? I'd ask if I could, but whenever I try to approach him, he gives off a "don't come near me" vibe, making conversation impossible. If things continue this way, the atmosphere at home is only going to get more tense. Just when I was thinking I needed to somehow have a conversation with my husband, he spoke to me for the first time in days when he got home. However, he didn't want to talk, he just wanted to bash me. "I hear you've been neglecting my mom while I've been away, living off the money I sweat for. What's this all about?" I was shocked and asked what he was referring to, and it turns out my mother-in-law had told him I was bullying her. She said I didn't feed her, didn't help her bathe, and refused to assist her with the toilet. It was completely out of the blue for me. I had no idea what she was talking about. My stay-at-home wife seems to have a pretty big attitude for someone who's just living off my earnings. "You've got all this free time as a housewife, so you should at least take proper care of my mother," my husband yells. But I want to say something. It's true, I decided to live with and take care of my mother-in-law. But I made that decision because my husband said he would help. Then, suddenly, he and my mother-in-law are telling me it's easier for women to talk and that it'd be more comfortable for my mother-in-law with another woman around. They asked me to quit my job to spend more time at home. They sprung it on me. I wanted to handle my resignation and say goodbye to my clients and colleagues properly, so I asked to wait at least 6 months. But they cornered me, saying what if my mother-in-law's condition worsens within those 6 months? They forced me into a situation where I had no choice but to quit sooner, all orchestrated by my mother-in-law and husband. Why did I even marry a woman like you, who can't do anything right? Not the housework, not the caregiving. The meals are monotonous and boring, and yet, you have the nerve to nickel and dime me for living expenses, just a money-hungry woman, he berated me. No charm, not a single cute thing about you. Always in unattractive clothes, no makeup. Not even looking like a woman, and I have to see your face every day, my husband said. I wish I could tell him who made me this way. I want to dress up occasionally. I want to at least do my makeup to look presentable. My hair's a mess, and I haven't been to a salon once since we got married, nor do I have enough time to bathe properly. My skin is a mess from lack of sleep and stress, my hands are inflamed and swollen. He calls me dirty and has banished me from the bedroom. I sleep on the living room couch. Still, I endured. I had decided to live with and take care of my mother-in-law, so I was determined to see it through. But I've reached my limit. The original agreement was that my husband would also participate in the caregiving, and that's why I agreed to both living together and caregiving. Why am I the only one being blamed when he hasn't kept his promise once? It's unfair. If my husband doesn't change his attitude, I have my own plans. In fact, I became a bit suspicious when my husband's business trips increased. I had tried not to worry about it until now, but given everything, I decided to look into it without restraint. So, when my husband said he was going on another business trip and left the house, I took action. A few hours after he left, I called his workplace. I said I needed to pass on an urgent message but couldn't reach him on his cell, and asked for his business trip location and accommodation details. Then, I was told he had taken personal leave and wasn't on a business trip at all. Moreover, there were no business trips last week or the week before that, and there's no work in his department that requires business trips. I could sense the hesitation from the person on the phone, debating whether to tell me the truth. Regardless of the reason, it was clear my husband was lying to his wife at home. However, I managed to get the necessary information using the communication skills I developed as an insurance agent. Yet, my husband, unaware that I knew about his lies, came back from his business trip complaining about how hard it was. Hurry up with dinner. Isn't the bath ready yet? At least prepare something for me to drink after work, he demanded, displaying a level of male chauvinism that made me want to retort, "What era do you think this is?" But I complied without objection. Pleased, my husband drank until he fell into a deep sleep. Once he falls asleep after drinking, he won't wake up until morning. Knowing this, I went through my husband's bag and checked his smartphone and credit card e-statements. If he hadn't changed his habits since we were dating, the potential pins he used were limited. I tried one and it worked on the first try, allowing me to smoothly go through his phone and payment details. After taking photos of the evidence with my phone, I contacted a certain person. While my husband and mother-in-law had been keeping an eye on me, they never took away my smartphone. Instead, they just told me to keep my location accessible at all times. I suppose my husband was checking to make sure I was home while he was away. Their failure to take my smartphone allowed me to hold on to the evidence of my husband's secrets. For this alone, I am thankful to my husband. After a while, I received a call from an unfamiliar hospital. Neither my husband nor I had needed a doctor or hospital for years, except for my mother-in-law's longtime family doctor. However, since moving in with my in-laws, I had been too far from the hospital I used to visit for anything minor, and neither my husband nor mother-in-law had ever taken my complaints seriously, accusing me of pretending to be sick to get out of work. Confused by the call from an unknown hospital, I hesitated but answered when they called back immediately. Nowadays, hospital calls are automatically identified even if the number isn't saved. The caller identified themselves as a nurse from the surgery department at a certain hospital and informed me that my husband had been in a traffic accident and was brought in. I recognized the hospital name right away. It was a large general hospital near my husband's workplace. My husband was alive but needed to be hospitalized for a while due to multiple fractures. They asked me to bring his insurance card and anything else he might need for his stay. I was shocked but quickly got myself together to prepare for my husband's hospital visit. I hurried to get ready and wanted to head out as soon as possible, but I ended up getting delayed by my mother-in-law's whims, which I knew would only lead to complaints from my husband. Late. How long do you expect me to wait after the nurse said she got hold of my wife? You're a stay-at-home wife with nothing but time. You should be able to move faster in an emergency. Useless woman. He vented his anger by hitting the tray table. His bed was in the back of a 4-person room, but fortunately, there were no other patients in the room at the time. Being yelled at like this without concern for anyone else's eyes, it's not just embarrassing for me but puts my husband in a bad light due to his own prejudice. Knowing him, he'd complain about the attitudes of roommates if there were any. He might even make a fuss about wanting a private room. Being treated so arrogantly both inside and outside the home is embarrassing for me, being his wife. I just hoped he wouldn't make me feel any more ashamed than I already was. The reason for my late arrival was my mother-in-law's selfishness. She insisted on going to the hospital with me and wouldn't listen to reason. To take a wheelchair-bound mother-in-law out, we had to call a wheelchair-accessible taxi, but when I called, they said they couldn't come right away. The family car was in my husband's possession. Initially, he bought a wagon-type car to fit the wheelchair in the back, saying it was necessary for moving his wheelchair-bound mother. However, he switched it for a fancier car on a whim and used it for commuting and business trips, so it hardly ever got used for my mother-in-law's benefit. In general taxis, it's rare to find a driver who is a certified nursing assistant or similar. And company policies often prohibit drivers from performing any caregiving tasks. To avoid complications in case of an incident. Unable to arrange for a care taxi, I asked my mother-in-law to give up for the day, but she started a fuss about how she could not be absent in her son's crisis. She suggested I could just carry her, and in the end, I had to call a regular taxi and manage to get my mother-in-law in and out of the car and handle the wheelchair myself. The taxi driver looked very apologetic. He couldn't offer any help with my mother-in-law because touching a female passenger could be problematic. And also, he didn't touch the wheelchair because of liability concerns if anything happened to it, which I understand is important. With all this, it took me about 3 hours from receiving the call about my husband's hospitalization to arriving at the hospital. If my mother-in-law had just stayed home, I think I could have gotten there in an hour or less by rushing in a taxi. As my husband was yelling at me, my mother-in-law muttered, "You're really slow, aren't you? Don't slack off on taking care of mom just because I'm hospitalized. And since you're my wife, I'm counting on you to take care of me too. Of course. You're my son's wife, after all. Don't slack off, I'll be sending a daily report of your activities to my son every night." "I appreciate it, Mom. This one tends to slack off easily." The two of them were in high spirits, laughing loudly. To them, I made a proposal. "If you want someone to take care of you so diligently, there's someone much more suitable than me, right? A woman from the same company." "Ah, yes, your mistress." My husband's face tensed for a moment, but then he relaxed it. "What are you talking about? Is this a time to be making such jokes when I'm in this state? Oh, you claim to have no idea? That's strange, because I have photos like this." I showed him images from his smartphone, clearly depicting him in the midst of an affair. Taken in a hotel room bed. "While I'm worn out taking care of your mother, you've been pretending to be on business trips to spend delightful nights with your mistress. Who would take care of a man like that, or the woman who raised such a man?" I threw the suitcase filled with my husband's clothes at him and stormed out of the hospital room. My mother-in-law was shrieking, "What kind of attitude is that to a patient?" But when I didn't stop and completely left the room, she followed me in her wheelchair. As I walked away outside the room, towards me, my mother-in-law cried out, "Wait! What my son did is his responsibility, it has nothing to do with me." Her voice sounded like mere noise to me, and I continued walking away. "Really, you're serious? If you leave me, how am I supposed to get back home? Wait! Don't leave me behind!" Still, I didn't stop or look back, continuing to walk away. After fully exiting the hospital and taking a deep breath of fresh air outside, I called someone. After finishing a few minutes of conversation with that person, I killed about 2 hours near the hospital and then returned to my husband's hospital room. Inside, my husband lay with a discontented look, while my mother-in-law seemed lost, gazing outside. As I approached my husband's bed, he noticed my presence and looked up. Seeing my face, he managed a nasty smirk, lifting only the corners of his lips. "Took you quite some time to reflect. You know, even a monkey reflects in a matter of seconds, yet your brain seems to be worse than a monkey's." Reacting to his voice, my mother-in-law looked at me, her face visibly relaxing with relief. She was genuinely glad I had returned. Instead of offering a word of apology, what came to their minds was to start berating me together. "You heartless ingrate! Leaving me here, what a cursed wife you are!" The expressions on their faces were far from those of sane people as they started threatening me with phrases like, "Don't ever do this again, and if you do, you'll be severely punished." One after the other, words of criticism flew at me from both my husband and mother-in-law. Amidst this, a knock sounded on the door, and the CEO of the company my husband works for appeared. When a person who shouldn't be there suddenly shows up, it seems humans tend to freeze. My husband had exactly that expression. He couldn't fathom why the CEO would come to visit an employee on the day of his hospitalization. "My greeting, my husband is greatly indebted to you. made my mother-in-law stop her tirade, possibly thinking he was some higher-up from my husband's company. "If it's my son's superior, you should have said so," she whispered to me. "No, this person is an old acquaintance of mine." I explained that the CEO had a long-standing connection with me, originally being a classmate of my father during their student days. They had maintained a close relationship, even involving their families. We even spent summer vacations at the CEO's private villa when I was a child. This connection didn't change even after I became an adult, sometimes meeting without my father. Even after getting married, he said our relationship wouldn't change and had invited me out for meals several times. At first, I hesitated to tell my in-laws about these invitations because our marriage was still new. But when I felt overwhelmed by caregiving and desperately wanted to go, I opened up to my husband and mother-in-law, only to be denied the outing. When I found out about my husband's affair, I immediately consulted the CEO. I also told him about showing the evidence to my husband, who defiantly dismissed it. The CEO took the time to review the evidence of my husband's infidelity I had collected. However, he wanted to hear both sides before making any decisions, so he planned to secretly learn my husband's true intentions without showing himself in the hospital room immediately. Unaware of the CEO's knowledge, my husband acted as usual upon my return. When she told me, I was skeptical, but there have been anonymous complaints about your conduct at work too. After hearing her story and doing a little digging, I discovered you were involved in some serious misconduct. What I thought was a photo of a hotel room affair turned out to be the bedroom of the company-owned villa. Further investigation revealed my husband had been escaping work under the pretense of caring for his mother, engaging in adulterous acts with a female employee at hotels multiple times. The CEO informed my husband that appropriate actions would follow and left the room. That being said, I will be filing for divorce. My husband never imagined I knew the CEO personally, let alone that his infidelity was exposed. He must be feeling utterly bewildered now, but I had no intention of showing him any concern. I placed the already filled-out divorce papers in front of him. I also said, I've already consulted a lawyer about alimony and other matters, so let's discuss this through our lawyers from now on. Wait. After enjoying the life my earnings provided, you're going to throw me away just because I spent one night with another woman? Yes. You've enjoyed a 3-meal-a-day lifestyle thanks to your son's earnings, haven't you? What about the affair? It's better to have a man who can provide than one who can't. Why can't you see that? You're so narrow-minded. My husband and mother-in-law started saying that I would definitely regret it if I abandoned them here. But my intuition was screaming that I would regret it if I didn't divorce now, so I had nothing more to say to them. They were making a fuss, but I quickly walked towards the CEO waiting outside the hospital room and left without looking back. Later, my husband got fired from his job during his hospital stay. It was discovered he had been taking company property and reselling it. The money he earned from this was completely spent on his affair. A report of theft was filed. My husband turned pale and was at a loss for words when he heard this. Initially resistant to the divorce, he quickly agreed after the woman he had an affair with visited him during my absence, sweet-talking and comforting him. However, when he lost his job, the mistress changed her attitude drastically. Facing the prospect of being unemployed, needing to care for a demanding mother-in-law, and his own need for care after the hospital stay, she promptly abandoned my husband without hesitation. Months later, after completing rehabilitation and being discharged, my husband came home to the awaiting task of caring for his mother. Since he couldn't care for his mother while hospitalized, we had been using paid caregiving services, leaving our finances in dire straits. Right after discharge, he was overwhelmed by the care for his whimsical mother-in-law. Unable to work full-time due to the caregiving responsibilities, he took up a low-paying part-time job. However, his income was nowhere near enough to cover the expenses, and his debt kept growing. He ended up in a cycle of debt, eventually unable to borrow from reputable sources, and his application for social welfare was denied for various reasons. It seems he took out more loans using his house as collateral, but that's unlikely to last long, according to the neighborhood gossips. After divorcing, I immediately left my in-laws' house and turned to my former landlord, where I had lived alone before. Fortunately, there was a room available, so I decided to live there. When I reached out to a senior colleague at the insurance company I used to work for, I was told that they warmly welcomed the re-employment of experienced staff, so I secured a job again. However, working from the same branch as before might have its difficulties. With that consideration, I was assigned to work at a different branch in the neighboring city. Since the commute was only slightly longer, I didn't move closer to work. The job as an insurance agent is still challenging but rewarding. The more I put into it, the more it reflects in my salary, making it easy to set goals and feel fulfilled every day. My new boss is younger than me but has a lovable character like a big dog and is very friendly. Thanks to him, I quickly felt at ease in my new workplace. Gradually, we started seeing each other outside of work, and now he is my closest confidant in both personal and professional aspects. I've already met his parents, and I have a very good relationship with who will likely be my future mother-in-law. He is the youngest of 4 siblings and quite the baby of the family, so his father has even said he would love to have me as a daughter-in-law, considering an older wife would be just right for him. I have a feeling that a formal marriage proposal is on the horizon.